Hi, I'm Sue Finesse and I moderate the Unlocking Voices Facebook group where we learn and help parents to learn about Soma RPM. And of course, Soma doesn't need any introductions. Here she is. I thought today, Soma, it would be great if we could talk a little bit about the development of RPM, because things have changed an awful lot over the years, and there are a lot of misconceptions by people who are new to RPM about, what it actually is and what it actually can do and who it can help. So I thought today would be a great chance for us just to try and really clarify these points. So can I take you back to the very beginning of RPM? I mean, obviously you began with your own son, Tito. When was he born again?
1988.
1988. And I mean, basically you just figured out how to work with him. Just tell us a little bit about that.
I would see his sensory preferences, because Tito was totally nonverbal, and sort of he gravitated towards those sensory preferences. And then there was no language at all. And of course, he needed a diagnosis. So we went over there. But even prior to getting the diagnosis also, I started working around those sensory preferences. So somehow I taught him, what are you looking at? Okay, I would see what he's looking at. Now, if he's looking at his shadow, there's your shadow here. I'm standing over here. So are you looking at? So I would still give him the paper choices right over there. I know 2 years old, they can't talk. They can't even read, but I would still write shadow as a kind of a symbolic thing. Are you looking at your shadow or are you looking at your tree? But I would still state so that he began to select the right answer.
Right, so you were teaching the skill of almost how to choose.
Yeah. Yes, how to select. So wherever his visual attention went, I tried to make the 100%. And of course, he got the autism diagnosis.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and then the doctors were letting me go through all these different tests. I even remember once telling one of these big doctors over there, big shots over there, he was an older person, was trying to draw blood. And I said, you know what is the end goal of drawing blood? Like, draw blood and do what? Like, how will that help him? And here Tito is struggling over there, keep him calm. Okay, now I have to keep him calm, and then he's going to draw the blood over there. And then for what? So I was not into all these testing and all those different things. Okay, so I just knew that I have to do something about this sense, and no one else is going to do. Because if Tito improves, my life is going to improve.
Yeah. I remember reading in, I think it was your first book, you talked about how you noticed he was interested in calendars and numbers. Yes. And that kind of gave you a little doorway in, didn't it?
Yeah, but wherever, so I plucked the calendar from the wall. It was a wall calendar. And I said, sweet, this is 1, this is 2, touch 2. This is 1. Then when he did that, I said, oh yeah, this is good. This is 1, this is 2, this is 3. So did that. So now this is how we all started, and then came to ABC. First we did with the numbers because of his visual attention towards that. So wherever his vision followed, I just wrote over there, ignoring the fact that he's not reading. Those writings, even the choices that I wrote over there in paper, they were more like symbolic. Are you looking at the mirror or are you looking at the potato, like that?
Yeah. And then over time, you began to teach him, obviously, to spell. Yes. And presumably at that point, you just used a handwritten alphabet board, did you?
Oh, yes, I would just write ABCD like that. And then just to make it visually attractive, I would sometimes say, the first row I'm going to write on using red felt pens, the second row with green. So just to make it visually attractive so that he looks more.
Yeah. Okay. And then you also worked a little bit on handwriting as well. I remember you used didn't you have to use elastic bands or something to almost tie a pencil onto his hand?
Yeah, what to do? I had to do it because of my own survival skill and his own survival skill. No one was believing the letterboard communication.
Mm-hmm.
And so here I'm working all that hard, teaching him. And then I thought, okay, what's the end game if people don't believe him? And if people don't believe him, they are going to treat him differently.
Mm.
So by the time he was 6 years old, because he was younger, the muscle memory, I sort of like made him write, learn how to handwrite using the muscle memory.
Yeah. Okay, so that was all going on, and then at some point you were approached by a documentary maker from the BBC. When was that?
Yes. Now, one of my close friends in Bangalore who ran the mother support group, like she was sort of my mentor in Bangalore, and she went to National Autism Society of England.
Yeah.
And then and then Dr. Richard Mills, he got interested and he told the BBC and they came.
Right.
And sort of the BBC made out of nowhere, they made the movie, the Tito story in 1999, and then we got invited, using some of the neuroscientists like Dr. Merzenich and then Portia Iverson from Cure Autism Now. They saw the movie and then they invited us to the autism conference. They had an autism conference where Tito answered questions. It was more like a questionnaire.
Right. So just to go back, so it started off with the BBC documentary in the UK, and that was it was an inside story. It was called an Inside Story documentary, and it was called Tito's Story. That was actually broadcast, I think, in the UK in the year 2000, and then. And that got the interest of the people in America, Portia Iverson, etc. So then you were sort of almost on stage there, and you were then invited to America, weren't you, by Portia?
So, yes. After that, the Cure Autism Now Foundation invited us for 4 months because they wanted. So by then, Tito had learned the movements. Those were old-fashioned computers, how to move the mouse and other things, right? So without facilitation, how to move the mouse, because they conducted certain tests. So Dr. Merzenich, Yoram, Bonet. So now he's in Israel and he teaches in Haifa University. So they all organized together and they conducted a lot of tests which required computer maneuvering skills independently.
Right.
So these were sensory tests, and even I wanted to learn about Tito because the way he was talking, like he would say, how would I see that when I'm seeing this? So I would say, you didn't see this? Then he would say, well, how would I see that when I'm seeing this? And I would think, okay, let's see what they find out over here. Mm-hmm. So those tests were so interesting, and I found a way. So how to work with him better. So
was this, for example, I remember once when we were chatting, I remember you telling me about how, forgive me if I haven't remembered correctly, but I think Tito had a blue shirt, and I'm sure I remember you telling me that on one of the tests you found out that he didn't want to wear it, but that on the test showed that like the pain part of his brain lit up when he had the blue shirt on.
Oh no, that was a tactile. See, so what they did was that when they did the fMRI, and they did the different kind of things. So with the touch, because Tito is very tactile defensive. Okay, so they gave some tactile like sensitivity over here, and so his whole visual cortex lit up. So he was actually seeing a touch. So it all matched his description when he would write. I thought that he was great in metaphors, but no, it was so automatic for him that the touch was blue like that, because the touch, that part of the brain got stimulated, and he, instead of recognizing the touch, he saw the color.
Right. Okay, so so let's sort of move forward a little bit. You were featured, you were working with quite a few children by then in the United States.
Oh, yes.
And
That
when you
is also
first,
another story.
yeah,
I was supposed to return to India. Then September 11th happened, and the families asked me, Portia and other families asked me to work with their children while I waited for my trip back to India.
right.
Then
Right.
I began to work with a broader field of children. And then I found that, I just have to edit something what I did for Tito with this child, with that child. And sort of even I wanted to learn a little more.
Yeah. So this is where I suppose you really got hooked into, not just wanting to help Tito, but really, you found it in a way mentally stimulating for yourself, trying to figure out how to work with all these different types of children. So at this stage, though, would you say that most of the children you were working with were non-verbal, severely autistic?
Children were there. 2 verbal students were there, where I was helping them with, they gave me a school to work with as part of my fellowship. And there were 2 verbal students. One had Asperger's and one had reading disabilities. So where even I learned how to work and get them reading and do that, because then I had to create a kind of a reading plan different from the usual one.
Right. And just going back to things like letterboards, at this stage, had you developed even things like the stencils, or was it still just alphabet boards?
Stencils were not there at all in my radar at that time. So stencils, I happened to, I got these writing stencils, these small 99-cent store. We had these writing stencils. So I saw that Will, one of my students, Will, he still comes to me. I'm seeing him since he was 7 years old. So he's a local boy from Austin. So he would, every time I knew that he was ready for letterboard, but every time I would give him the traditional letterboard, he would just shake it away. Somehow he was so visually defensive towards it. Now, when I gave the pencil and the stencil, that small stencil over there, he began to get interested. And then I got these. So first I got these made out of wood. So my first stencil were wooden stencils. But then children got very creative. They would chip the wood out. and then they would peel the paint out over there and make them ugly. So then I thought that, okay, let's get something that which is dishwasher safe. And we can put them in the dishwashers and clean them. So then I got the plastic.
Was that when you'd moved to Halo that you started with the stencils, or was it before then?
No, after that, way back later. Like I think I first started using stencils in 2006. Right. So I moved to Halo, like in Austin. I moved in 2004, and I started the stencils then. And then I saw a group of students like wonderfully responding to the stencils better than the letterboard.
Yeah. I mean, on some of the old videos, I've seen different types of stencils. I've seen them with smaller letters on and then larger letters. And it's something that you've just developed over time, isn't it? Breaking the stencils into the 3 parts and all the time. I think, what I see from you is that you're looking for, well, what might help next? What might help more? How can I enhance what I'm doing? So let's go to, we've just mentioned about moving to Halo, and I'm going to pull up, this was the first book that you published. Now, this one was back in 2008.
I need to learn how to work. Otherwise, how would I write without knowing? Like, you have to have some substance in order to write something that thick. So I wrote that book. Once I had to give it. I can't rush things like that. I have to learn properly. I have to so that when people ask me questions, I should be able to answer.
Yeah. I think I read somewhere that you'd worked with about 700 students before you wrote that book.
by then I was doing full-fledged camps. I was doing like 10 to 11 sessions a day.
Mm-hmm.
And then I learned, and so that I was ready. And so I wrote.
So when you wrote this, the first book, you put a lot of information about the sort of the theory behind.
I know it's sort of boring. It sort of turned out to be boring. Really, if someone asks me how was it, look, I'll be honest, it is boring like that. Like that's why many times people feel it's difficult to read. Now looking back, it was one of my growing up stages also. In our time.
Yeah, well, we all learn and we all develop, but I'll be honest with you, when I first came across this book, I did find it hard reading, and I did have to really motor through it, and I kept wanting to flick to the back, because the back was more the practical side of how you deliver lessons to your child. And that's what I, as a parent, that's what I wanted to do. I just wanted to get started and get stuck in. But then once I'd had a little bit of a go, I'll be honest, I did find it helpful to go back, and still do sometimes go back and look at this book, and we'll gain things from it. So when you wrote this one anyway, did you envisage that you would be writing any more?
No. In fact, the second book about curriculum guide, I wrote it on request. Yes, that was requested. Like, now what are we going to talk? See, these are the times, like you can say prehistoric time of RPM, when even the schools, everything was new. So the parents had to take everything, the matters to themselves. And so then I had to write. In fact, that orange book and my math book, I worked the most, because I had to get the syllabus of New York State, California State, then Illinois, and then also of Texas. And then I had to see what children learn, and to break up into 7 stages.
Yeah, I particularly remember this book, Soma, because it came out the same year that I saw you for the very first time, which was 2011. And and I remember after seeing you, one of the things that I did, I don't know whether you remember this, but to me it was a really big thing. I remember going through and looking at the maths section in here, and there was a little section on doing a lesson on graphs, and that was one of the first videos that I sent to you for some feedback. Of me doing a little session with Chris on maths, and how many DVDs if you watched on a Monday and a Tuesday, and then constructing a graph. So I've got very fond memories of this book, and I'm just going to hold up a picture as well. One of the things that I really love about this book is, I don't know if people can see that.
Yes, that is a part of the sensory activities where
this brought to life, particularly for people who haven't been able to sort of physically see you deliver lessons. It kind of brings to life a little bit about, you know, it's not just about talking, it's about including sensory activities, making lots of paper models, really engaging the student in that way. So, you know, that was just one of the things I really liked about that one. Okay, then, so that was 2011. Then we had this one that came out in 2013, your green book, Developing Communication for Autism using RPM. Yeah, so how did this come about?
That was easy writing, because, you know, it's just about the regular chat. Okay, now students, like, you know, children have to communicate. Yeah. So now it's not all learning. See, if at all, it's the mind is not just a bag. There has to be a kind of a give and take. What is my understanding? What do I have? What is my opinion that I'm forming out of that topic that I just learned? See, so here, what if I want to get creative and write a story? So I taught River. Okay, so if the students say, you know, I would like to write a story about a river. So how to do that? that part. Okay, now how to get the students the communication, like for example, using a picture. Okay.
Oh yeah, yeah.
As a kind of a visual angle.
I'll just say that was one of my absolute favorite sections in this book. I'll help you up again. You know, it absolutely blew my mind. I was thinking, how on earth can you create a whole lesson just from that picture?
A picture.
And when I read it really blew my mind away. It really did. So, and that has been an amazing learning for me over the years, and continues to be, you know, that you can use anything really to create a really valuable lesson from. And it's not just about saying, oh, what do you see in the picture? You can really explore so much more from that.
And a dialogue over there. What do I like about the picture? I like this. What do you like about this picture? So there would be a kind of a back and forth with a visual angle of a picture.
Yeah, and I mean that picture that I just showed, you know, just even coming up with the question of, you know, if imagine that you're a bird sitting on that cable, what might you see? What might you be thinking? I think that really helps to develop the imaginative and creative skills that our children have, you know, and really bring that out. So there was while we're just on this book as well, there was another great chapter in there which I thought was, you know, so practical and so helpful, which was how to communicate about physical pain.
Oh yes, because I had to literally teach my son, because he was so tactilely oblivious. And so just to create a physical, just like you have the letter board, you create a body board, or you make a sketch over there and sort of create a body awareness, because without tactile learning, otherwise children are going to just guess. The tooth is hurting, but if at all the pain sensitivity is less, the cavity is going to grow until it becomes too much that way. So children won't be able to point or tell.
Yeah, I mean, I think that in your later books as well, you've kind of expanded on this and revisited that one, particularly about awareness of body parts and stuff. But that was a great introduction to it, I felt. Okay, so that was your first sort of 3 books. Then the next one, if you can remember, was this one. Developing motor skills.
So that was necessary to write, because just like with Tito, I realized that we don't live on a letterboard. We live in a 3-dimensional environment. So how to get this letterboard like pointing towards navigating the other parts of the environment and the kinesthetic, like kinesthetic mapping. Like, go and fetch the keys. Now, if at all I don't have the right kind of kinesthetic mapping, I may know that there's the key, but I may not make my body go and get the keys. So here, it is just like navigating the letterboard. We have to grow towards the movements and other things to navigate towards the environment.
Yeah, so this was the first book really where you'd move beyond the sort of the academics to the more of the practical, sort of being able to use all the principles of RPM, but to apply them in a practical way to improve the quality of life, really, of your students.
Children would just wait over there for someone to bring the letterboard, and then they are going to be very smart. But take the letterboard away, then they won't know what to do.
Yeah. So, I mean, I just made a couple of notes. You've got things like manipulating body parts, manipulating the environment, picking up objects, learning to use both hands, fetching an object, looking at a book, turning the pages, folding towels. And then there's things like understanding prepositions on, under, inside, etc., and being able to move objects appropriately. I mean, it's packed with loads of great information there. In fact, when I was just preparing to talk to you today, I re-looked at that book and thought, God, I must read it again. And this is what I find whenever I look back through your books. I think, oh, flipping heck, I think I've kind of know it, and then I think, oh God, I need to re-look at that one again, because every time I look, I find a little bit more. Oh yeah, and there was also in that one a little bit about teaching handwriting and teaching recreational games as well. So
Yes.
leisure activities.
Yes.
Because that's such an important aspect, and a great thing for kids to be able to do, to engage with others and to be
Yes.
part of the family.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, so there's that one. Now, then this was 2015.
Okay.
I got the right one. Harnessing stims and behaviors in autism using RPM. Do you remember this one?
Yes, yes. Okay, so I had to write that because I saw children with autism are full of, you can say, this mischief. Okay, okay, let me push the boundaries. Okay, let me get impulsive. Let me do this. Now, how can you dodge and redirect all those mischief towards a kind of a purposeful lesson, so that there's a better goal than the mischief goal over here? Because otherwise, what happens is these things impulse, then OCDs, then excitatory stim, where I just can't stop myself over here. They are going to come and become a big hurdle over there towards a kind of a purposeful demonstrating of learning and knowledge. And so you don't want that time to get wasted that you are putting over there towards that student. And so that's why I had to write that.
Yeah, and I think for you, you know that parents pay to come and see you, and they pay you for
responsibility.
That's right, and this is one of the things I really respect about you. It's like, oh, you don't turn around and say, oh no, he's not in a good place today, so we won't do the lesson.
No. There's no question about that.
That's right. You work with whatever you've got on that day, and it doesn't matter what the behavior is, it doesn't matter what the OCD is or the STIM is. You find a way to work with it, don't you, and to work through it. And you shared a lot of great knowledge in that book about how to suddenly adapt lessons. I can remember with Chris, I think it was one of the early sessions that you had with him, he was totally obsessing about, I think it was about going to McDonald's. I mean, we don't do McDonald's anymore, but in those days, I think we travelled a long journey, and we'd said to him, we'll go to McDonald's on the way home, as people do. And he was totally and utterly obsessing about it. And I was fascinated because you just turned the whole lesson around and ended up having a little conversation about McDonald's. And I think he created a new meal for the McDonald's menu in your lesson.
Oh, okay.
I think it was a McChip sandwich or something.
Okay, see what happened is you have to either dilute it, or you have to delay it, or you have to just scramble it. So something has to work.
Yeah. So that was really good. So I think in that book as well, I'd forgotten about this until I came to look at it again. You've got a good final chapter in here, which was just answering some common questions about RPM and getting started, like when's a good time to start? He's not responding to choices. Does that mean he isn't a good RPM candidate? Where should I start? My child's 15 years old. So there's some good information in that final chapter in there that answers some of the common questions as well. All right, let's motor on through, Soma. I remember you bringing this with you to the UK on one of your visits and hand delivering it to me. This one was developing expressive language in verbal students, and this one was published in 2016. So round about this time, or before this time, you'd had an increasing number of verbal students coming to see you at your clinic, and you'd been basically learning how to work effectively with them. So tell us a little bit about this what led to this book and so forth.
Yeah, see, I saw that the verbal children did not respond well with the letterboard and spelling, and sometimes they thought that it was too ridiculous to spell, and sometimes they would just blurt the spelling out because they can talk. RAI and rain, what do I want to talk? I don't want to study about rain, that kind of a thing. See, so then I began to categorize children based on the verbal abilities.
Mm-hmm.
So who is going to echo, like then who is going to have this kind of a rote speech, who will have the OCD speech, request speech, right? Or a kind of friendly. So I'll respond to hello and how are you, and then beyond that I'm not responding. See, so then
I think that was that's great, because that was a whole section in the book with the different types of speech.
So once you categorize, then you place the formula. If this happens, then I'll do that. This happens. See, you have to create a formula in order to make a kind of a work a system to, like, I'll call it an engine to work. And then after I learned, then I wrote that book.
Yeah. So this was really, really quite useful for, you know, and quite an eye-opener really, because a lot of people had only perceived that RPM was for people like Tito and people like my son Chris, who were non-verbal and would learn just to spell on the letterboards.
This is the thing. See, when people show these movies and documentaries and other things, they don't show the verbal children. They usually show non-verbal children who are on the kind of who are sensory struggling a little more. Mm-hmm. But then they don't show, and so people sort of take the verbal children for granted.
Yeah. Okay. There's just to bring to people's attention, there's another great section in this book, which I know we've covered many times on the Unlocking Voices Facebook group, but, you know, and it's something that I hammer home, why a discussion around episodic memory is not recommended in an RPM session. Just because I like to hammer it home. Go on, Soma, just tell us again, why should you not be asking questions about what you did yesterday and things like that?
See, episodic memory, the first thing that is about our experience. Now, the sensory experience is the first experience because the senses are the doorways between external and internal world. So now, if at all with my partial sensory system, I'm experiencing a system, so the sensory information is sort of a little different from how it should be. Now, so I may be having pancake, but then for breakfast, but then I may have a sensory experience of bread because that was in my mind. See, so then from there, then we have the emotional components of emotion. What kind of emotion was going on over there? See, so emotions also affect our taste buds. Right. So it's. I'm just giving an example of taste, but even the thing. Now, if someone says, "What's this for a nice, beautiful painting?" when I am emotionally anxious, I will miss out on a lot of visual things because my emotions are showing me a different kind of pictures.
Yeah.
Right. So now that then we have the component of belief. So sometimes our beliefs also mask what the reality is. Now, I'm supposed to see this. So a student who is believing that he is going to go to McDonald's after this. So what did the teacher teach? Okay, my component of belief is making me have this kind of a OCD mindset of after this, I'm going to go to McDonald's. So locally, I can answer the questions, but then I may be thinking about the McDonald's. See, all these different components, they have to assemble together in order to bring it out through the hippocampus region. That's where assembling takes place in order to language it and say. So many times you see, you ask episodic memory, and sometimes children don't want to feel that feel bad by saying, I don't remember. So then they sort of give some kind of a probable or
So, yeah.
answer over there, and which is sort of a little different from what actually happened.
Yeah. And then other people may use this to say, oh, look, that proves that RPM isn't valid, which is a nonsense because...
Yeah, see, in RPM, we have to keep the student cognitively, then skill-wise, we have to keep them engaged. It's a kind of a system. It's not just sitting over there and looking at the episodic memory and asking the questions over there. It's not about that.
Yeah. All right, let's just motor on through. You mentioned this book earlier, and this was the Developing Mathematical Concepts for Autism, and that was written in 2016. I remember talking to you about this one because you said that Tito wasn't really bothered about doing maths calculations. But
maths calculation is a whole different. If you look at an algebra like problem, it looks like an Xmas tree. See, so visual. So sometimes someone can be so students who are not visually interested or who don't have the visual stamina to exploit a full problem over there may get visually bored, and they may wonder, why am I doing this? So then I had to modify the mathematical concept for him. And to write that book, I really had to work very hard, how to flush out only the theories so that the students still have the mathematical understanding, but they don't have to go through the mathematical calculations.
Yeah. Okay, that's a good one. And then another one, this one is a real favorite of mine. This is your brown book, Growing Sensory Tolerance Using RPM, and this was 2019. And this one's packed with photographs and 5-minute practical exercises that people can use to work on visual, auditory, tactile and kinesthetic tolerance, isn't it?
Yeah, I actually meant to write that way earlier, but then I hesitated because people were associating RPM only with the letterboard.
Right.
But because I realized this very early on as Tito was growing up, just like he needs an academic curriculum, he needs a sensory curriculum.
Yeah, and this is kind of about assembling the senses, isn't it, together. To me, it's almost a continuation and a development from your blue book.
Yes.
There's quite a few things in there that reappear in the brown one, but
like where will the eyes look? Where will the when people say, okay, integration, okay, schools must integrate, but then if the sensors are not integrating, only school integration is not enough. Then the student can't go to this place, that place, because the senses are not integrating. See, so integration is a kind of a, you can say it's used only in a narrow thing over there, the schools are integrating.
Yeah, so, I mean, I'll be honest with you, when I hear, sensory integration, even the word sensory in relation to schools, what springs to my mind immediately is teachers, etc. If a child starts having any sort of a behaviour or a stim, it's, they need a sensory break. And the child is then removed from the learning environment and put, on a exercise ball or on a trampoline or whatever it is. And
see, this whole thing over there, our duty of not to let the student sensory stressed. Okay, now, so we have to know, ask ourselves, why is this sensory stress happening? Let's create a kind of a sensory curriculum so that sensory stress doesn't happen. Escaping it is not going to help the student, because after a while, the student is going to grow big, and then it would be the sensory learning would be a little harder. So that's why we would start building a kind of a sensory curriculum. Okay, so if the eyes are just seeing over here, so which I had to work with my son, where he would only see the shadows, only see the reflection, only see certain things over there. Then I had to make him see over there. So then I had to use something like a kind of a flashlight like this. Okay,
Yeah.
so I would use, we are looking at that, which
Yeah.
would create a kind of a sensory stamina to look where I want him to look. Because and otherwise he won't enjoy this visual world.
Yeah, yeah, and I have to say I've been, personally using loads of the exercises out of this book with Chris. They are so easy to do and so helpful. I would totally recommend people to use that. And we also see in this book the introduction of and the explanation of quite a few of the bits of terminology that you have developed really with RPM, talking about the idea of self-command, talking about the idea of delaying, diluting, scrambling, creating OCD, amnesia. These are all terms that really you've developed in your writing of your RPM books. So they're all the main books that you've written. You've also done some booklets, which I'm just going to hold up quickly because we're running a little short of time. We've got a developing reading skills. We've got a learning life skills. I think there was a craft booklet as well, again, which was about using the hands. But what I want to just get to before we finish today is, I know that you're constantly developing RPM. And I'm really excited at the moment because I know that you've been working hard over over Zoom over the whole COVID period, and you've been particularly working on speech skills.
Yes. Oh yes. See, I wouldn't see what looks like a luxury in the beginning becomes a necessity later on. So now it looked like, let me try speech, because during the COVID, I didn't have access to the letterboard. And then I saw the parents are not holding the letterboard, and I didn't want to nag the parents, hold it like that in front of the students, because I don't want the parents to feel bad and the students to feel bad. So then I said, okay, let me try working on this purposeful speech and acting. And then it worked, then it worked, then it worked. And now I'm doing real camps on purposeful speech with students who are, of course, there has to be emotional readiness, sensory readiness. Okay. And sort of a kind of a motor readiness, which I'm going to talk about in the speech talk over there. And so,
sorry. So you're going to do for practitioners. You're doing a talk on how to work on purposeful speech. Yeah.
Yes. Because that's the thing. Then they can serve more. So instead of just the letterboard, they can serve the community with speech also.
So if a student comes to you, let's just talk a little bit about how your approach has changed. If a student came to you 10 years ago in comparison to if a student comes to you today, let's just say a student comes to you today who has got some verbal skills, what would you do?
I would redirect that verbal skills towards speech, purposeful speech. And so it depends upon what kind of verbal the student has, like how to interrupt, because there are stages. Some students would be willing to be interrupted, some students would not would be resistant to be interrupted. So I would look at the interruption stamina. How far can I interrupt this student? And based on that, I would try my formulas, a few formulas that I made, because I like to make formulas.
And are you keeping them secret, or are they going to be in another book?
No, once I get good at it, but to explain like that, it's become so boring to write them down, right? I can make like maybe an audio book, something like that.
Yeah. Okay. So would you still be using the letterboard as well?
Letterboard is a must, because you have like thoughts to spelling and then spelling to speech. And so that letterboard is a must.
Right.
Like even if the letterboard is not there, even if the student, but spelling is a must. So thoughts to spell T to S, and S to speech.
Right. Okay.
S to S.
Okay. So I'm just sort of, we've got all these different categories now of students, and I'm sort of thinking we've got my son, who is very limited in his speech, but even with him, you're encouraging me to try to get him to verbalize in the same way that you've taught Tito over the years. This is a long process.
It's a process because, speech involves something. See, this spelling is something that we can externally show the student, but speech, even I don't know what my vocal cords are doing.
Mm-hmm.
And so there are process of breathing, the timing, and all kinds of things that go into it.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so we're going to work on speech developing speech even for students who are non-verbal when they are ready.
Yes. So students began speech in my sessions.
Yeah. And for those students who've already got speech, we're going to work on making that purposeful.
Yes.
Yeah.
Changing it up. See, like, for example, someone can say, okay, the reason I flap my hands. But then I would want to know reason how I stop flapping my hands. Mm-hmm. Right. So how to convert that muscle memory of reason why I flap my hands into redirect it into a different muscle memory.
Okay. Sorry, Soma, I'm just confused about that one. Just explain it again.
So for example, Tito would profusely flap his hands.
Yep.
And now he's not flapping his hands. So there were other interventions with purposeful movements and other things, a kind of a kinesthetic plan where the reason I stopped flapping my hands. Mm-hmm. Right. Otherwise, this is a muscle memory. Yep. The reason why I flap my hands. Yeah. And then reason why I stop flapping my hands, where the kinesthetic curriculum comes.
Right. Okay.
Right. Because what looks okay with a 5-year-old won't look okay with a 25-year-old and beyond.
Yeah. All right. Let's just sort of finish now, because I know that we're sort of at the end of our time. Kind of with a little summary of what an RPM session now might look like. Just a sort of if there is such a thing, a standard RPM session.
There are definitely this like how it used to look, because at that time I did not work with so many students, but now it's more like a multisensory approach.
Right.
And with multisensory, keeping the student in a multisensory engagement over there. And of course, a letterboard is a kind of a media over there, mm-hmm. where the student is going to express the thought. But that multisensory engagement is going to keep the student more attentive. And so those are the kinds of new things that people would see in a session today compared to what they saw 10 years ago.
Yeah, much more use of pictures, for example, and pointing on pictures and things.
Yes. And so lesson plans would look more like this. The visuals would look like this.
Yes.
To engage the visual aspects.
Yeah. In the past, it was just literally pencil and paper, wasn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. I think that should be just about it now. I think we're all right on time. Yeah, I've had done well.
Yes. So I'll let you go.
All right then. Thanks ever so much, Soma. Bye.
Yeah. Okay, bye.